right, first we're going to play Name This Chord. You rolling? Hi, people. It's Larry. Larry goes to Gruhns, and you might be a little alarmed, but this is all he had. Yeah, it's a Topo Chico. This is probably somebody's drink.
Probably.
Who brought this in, you think?
I'm not sure. Doesn't matter. We're good. Sorry about that.
We have some special guests. Aside from the usual folks, come on in here. It's a party. Come on in. Aside from the usual Cory and Greg, that's always part of it. We have a person you may recognize here from the Grand Ole Opry. It's Gill.
Hello, Thomas.
We have the guy that owns this dump, George Gruhn. Thanks for being here.
Off to a great start.
I'm just kidding, George. Calm down. It's my favorite. It's my favorite store. You know it. It's not a dump. We have a lot of other folks hanging around. Introduce yourselves if you don't mind. This is like we have like a posse this time. It's great.
Security.
Yeah, it's security. Yeah.
I'm Scott Major, friend of George.
All right.
Cal Waddleton. Shane Minton.
All right.
Hey, Donnie Hearn.
All right. These guys they know a lot about old cars, and that's cool with me. What do you guys want to? We don't have a plan.
We do have a plan.
We have a plan.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a soft one, but this I kind of always wanted to chat about. Yourself and George have done videos in the past where you guys talk about guitars and the history of Martins and so on and so forth. But I don't know if a lot of people are aware that you guys have been friends for as long as you have been friends.
Yeah.
I'm talking since you were a late teenager or
Yeah,
something.
we're
Since you were a
closing in
teenager.
on 50 years.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Has he changed since you first met him? Is he the same guy?
I think in many ways I'm not the same guy.
I'm talking about him, not you.
As he changed, we've both changed. And
Yeah,
I
he didn't
hope
have a beard when I first met him.
he had longer hair.
He did. I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
Goldilocks.
But the fact is, I think that we've both gained wisdom.
Yeah, for sure.
We've gained skill.
Right.
And in my case, I think I've gained more compassion for others than I had back then.
We're proud of you for that.
And in many ways, no, I'm not the same person. And I don't want to go back and be that same guy.
George is
Oh,
not my fault.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't mind having a body that age
Right.
and keep all the knowledge I have.
That's right. That's right.
But no, I don't want to go simply repeat it.
Do you happen to remember the very first guitar you bought from Dearest George?
Oh gosh, you know how this is how we. I used to see the he had a list that was on paper
Right.
of all the
Right. This is
instruments
when the
that
store
he
was downtown.
Yeah,
Like a handwritten, or was it like an old typewriter?
No, it was like
type?
an old typewriter kind of thing,
Right.
and I would always love to peruse those and see what he had and this and that, and his partners were Tut Taylor and Randy, right? Randy Woods.
Randy
Yeah.
Wood, yeah.
Yeah.
Tut was my partner for the first 9 months.
Yeah.
Randy was actually an employee, but the shop name was GTR Incorporated, an
Nice.
abbreviation for guitar, but also George Tut and Randy. But Randy wasn't actually an owner. He was an employee
Gotcha.
for 3 years.
And I was in high school
Right.
playing in my bluegrass bands,
Right.
and there was a guy named Roland White who was a great mandolin player and passed away a few years ago. And he played with his brother Clarence. Clarence was a legendary guitar player and all that. And Roland took me under his wing when I was a kid and brought me 3 or 4 packs of strings,
Nice.
GTR strings, and I still have them.
You still have
Oh, wow.
them? Amazing. You must not have liked them very much.
I just kept the packaging. But then I moved to Kentucky out of high school, and we unfortunately had a bunch of stuff stolen out of our house. And one thing that was stolen was my father's banjo, an old Fender banjo.
Yeah.
And we called George, and I said, any chance,
Right.
any of this stuff? He goes, I don't know how to tell you this, but I sold it. I
Damn.
had no idea it was
It
stolen.
was the same one?
This is my dad's banjo.
Oh,
Went to
wow.
Japan or something, and I'm trying to find it. Been trying to find it, and maybe it'll turn up someday.
And what's that other guitar you're trying to find? There's 2, right?
Yeah, Martin D41 from 1971 that I traded when I was 18. I moved to Louisville to play in the Bluegrass Alliance, kind of well-known bluegrass band that
Right.
Sam Bush used to play in, Tony Rice used to play in that band at different times.
Right.
And I decided to take a flyer and buy a herringbone. You know, I was 18,
Totally.
and I bought 1942 D28. It was had a big sign on the case at a bluegrass festival. It said pre-war D28, $2,500.
Damn.
And I said, "Can I see that?" And he said, "Can you afford it?" And I said, "Well, probably not, but I'd sure like to see it."
Right.
You know, and he let me see it, and I was playing it, and I said, "Oh, man, I have to have this." And I said, "Would you consider a trade?" And he said, "Well, hell no." You know. And so I traded him my
There's a lot of money in
D41
there.
and $1,650, I think.
Right.
And that $1,650 was all the money I'd saved from my future.
Yeah.
It was going to be my college fund, my
Yeah.
whatever. And I spent it all on that guitar, and I still have it
Don't have
to
it.
this day.
Oh yeah.
This
We'd
guy
like to
never
find it.
sells
No.
anything.
Every now and then. I
God
will.
bless him.
I mean, you still have 90% of the guitars you can
Yeah.
own, I'm sure.
And so many things I'll buy things to cheer on a
Right.
boutique maker or
Right,
whatever and say,
right.
yeah, I got one. So
Right.
tell people I bought one
Right,
and help
right.
you out and whatever. But
Right.
none of the great stuff I'd ever get rid of.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, on that topic, I want to make mention of this, is that there's a lot of artists, performers, people with big names, whatever it might be. I'm aware of the spending habits on a lot of these folks, obviously from being here at Gruhns.
Yeah.
You have supported the arts, luthiers, for decades now. Decades now. And I know these guys so well. Everyone's built something for you.
Yeah.
And what I always, and the story's always the same. Sells for top buck.
Yeah.
And I think for builders, you purchasing one instrument, they might put out 10 or 15 or more, whatever it might be. It does make an impact, and it's huge
Yeah, man.
for these guys, for these builders. And I can't name another person that has a collection purely for the reason of supporting the arts.
Yeah, and I don't, and I've never endorsed a company.
Yeah.
I don't have a model. I don't have a, whatever. And even Fender 30 years ago, they said, we want to make a Vince Gill model Telecaster. And I laughed at them. I go, why? I said,
Right.
I already play your guitar every night. I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah.
I said, you're not going to build a better guitar than that one.
Right.
But they tried and they didn't. But
Did it ever go into pressure? Vince Gill tell you?
no, God,
Yeah,
no.
never did.
I didn't want anything
Right,
like that. It's
right.
not my style.
Right.
And let's not forget, we helped you thin out your collection a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Just things like you're speaking of.
Yeah.
And I remember one guy I bought some guitars from that he made, and I brought them down here for George to sell, and he called me. He said, "Did I do something wrong?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Why are you?" I said, "I never play them." I said, "I bought them. I didn't ask you to give them to me."
Right.
That's what I don't want to do. Is
Right.
I get
these
that.
guys are struggling to get by, and I said, "Let me buy it. I can afford it."
That's right.
Yeah, man.
It's a way to do it.
Well, I've seen it when we were on the road together, man. People would always bring you guitars, and you're always so kind to them. Like, you hand it to me, and you're like, "What do you think of this?" I'm like, "I hate it." And I see you carrying
Where's
the
my
case out.
grandfather's? Thank you so much.
Even he's carrying the case out. I remember that one time, man. I'll never forget. I forget what city we were in, though, but you, God, somebody brought an old Gill or something, and it was an old Gretsch. It was some Holland body. And it was like the family heirloom, and you looked at it for him, and I think you might have signed it for him or something. I don't know if you ended up buying it or something, but you were like, I go, "What did you think of that guitar?" And you go, "That would have made a good flower pot."
Well, the one thing I love doing, I think more than anything of all this guitar stuff, is there's certain times that a friend of mine will get into hard times. Say, "Hey, I can't pay for my house.
Yeah.
Will you buy this?" And I said, "Yeah, but." I said, "You can have it back when you get back on your feet," and that's happened.
Or a friend has a
Doesn't
gambling
time.
problem.
Well, that would be you. I have several of your bad weekends.
You ever hear that story? I brought a nice old telly over there one time. I said, "Hey, man, would you mind buying this?"
I had a bad week.
Had a bad
Bad
Sunday.
week at the football team. And this, whatever you want it.
Oh, dude. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
But that, for what it's worth, that has been made mention in circles on the builder side of folks that actually build instruments. That has been a topic of discussion for almost 2 decades now.
Yeah.
in that, and everyone says it with such pride.
Well, he does the same thing with artists. Everybody. I mean, these guys like fucking.
Yeah. Same with repair guys. I always tell. I remember this was a funny story. About 10 years ago, there was a repair guy that did some work on one of your instruments, and he was like, "Man, it's just not coming together. It's not looking this way or that way, or so on and so forth." I'm like, "Well, it's pretty good. It looks good, and just tell Vince all about it, and he'll be cool with it." And he's like, "All right, cool." So later on, I went up to him, and he goes, "Man, Vince must have really loved it." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "Man, he didn't say anything. He paid full pop for everything, played it, kind of smiled and walked away." He goes, "So that's good." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's not. He's a stand-up guy. You could have given him a bag of turds, and he would have smiled at you and said, 'Yeah, what's the bill?' and walk away. That's not a way to measure Vince's happiness."
And I'm gonna tell you a great guitar friendship story, and he knows the guy that this story is about. It's a guy named Harry Sparks, and his name's Sparky, and he did all of Sam Bush's mandolin luthier work when we all lived up in Louisville, and he was a good player, and he bought a D45 from George in probably 74 or 5, and we used to sit together, and I'd play my D28 and he plays D45, and then a couple of years later I moved off to California. Sparky called and he said, "Man, I'm in trouble and I need to sell my D45. Will you buy it?" And I said, "What do you want for it?" And he said, $9,500. I said, "I can't swing that." I said, "If you'll sell it to me for $7,500, I'll make you a promise that whenever you want it back, I'll sell it back to you for that." He said, "I can't turn that down." You know, so
Sure.
I had it for 10 or 15 years, and he called and he said, "Man, do you mean what you said about my D45? And I said, "Yeah, I meant what I said." And it's probably maybe worth $100,000 at the time, 75, who knows?
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, but 10 times what I paid for it. And I said, "No."
Did he get it back for 75?
Yeah.
Did he really?
So yeah.
That's
And
the-
here's the best part, the kicker. He kept it for the next 20 years, and then a few years ago, him and a bunch of our crony buddies all came down and made a record at my studio, Clawhammer banjo record and old timey record, and he boxed up his D45 and we were all playing it, you know, together again and all this. And he was heading out the door and he looked at me and he had it in the case and he goes, "Here."
Damn.
Oh,
Gave it to you.
Gave it to me. He said, "I'm not giving it to you, but I'm kind of giving it to you."
that's cool.
And it's
Wow.
a really neat
That's
friendship story.
That is
very
an
cool.
awesome story, man.
So much cooler than
That is
great,
very,
it's
very
worth
cool.
whatever, but friends can't put a price on them friends.
That's right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a story that
Wow.
is.
Sparky also went on to become a very well-known and successful architect, and the architectural renderings for renovating this building were done by
By
him.
Sparky, that's right.
Oh wow.
No
Yeah.
shit.
That's cool.
And he really is a good repairman. You know,
Yeah,
great front
yeah.
dresser and setter upper and
Yeah,
all that stuff.
he's good at what he does. I remember hanging with
Fantastic. Yeah, he
him
probably
some years
came-
back. Yeah.
Came down.
Mm-hmm.
He's the best.
You know what's cool too is there's an unsaid, which I'm about to say out loud here. There's this unsaid code of conduct and a code of behavior with regards to buying instruments from local dudes.
Yeah.
And that part about, you know, what you bought it for, keeping it for some time, your first dibs going back to that guy for the price that he sold it to you for.
That's it.
The prices fluctuate. There's been tons of examples on a dude deal
Yeah.
where all of a sudden, you know, I'm going to sell it back to my guy and lose 10 G's on it.
Yeah.
But that's right. It's the
right
way to
thing
do
to
it.
That's the right thing.
That's
to do.
that's the right thing to do, and you could almost filter out the non-Nashville dudes just by doing one guitar deal with them, and then you'll figure out
Well,
what's going on.
there was a store in Chicago that was their deal. They knew that all these instruments were going to appreciate. They said, "Whatever we charge you for it, we'll buy it back for you for that money."
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
You know, they knowing it's going to go up, so
Wow.
can't get hurt.
Yeah. That's good.
I'm a pawn shop that makes no money.
Yeah.
Truth be told, that's worked out for us as well. We could
Yeah.
always stand behind whatever we sold, and if they ever want their money back, even if it's X amount of years later with the appreciation,
Sure.
we're more than fine on it.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
George, do you ever miss the downtown shop in the old days?
Well, I miss some of what used to be
Right.
in that area,
Yeah.
but I do not and would not miss what Broadway has become. So, you know, it used to be sort of a Skid Row area,
Yeah.
but every musician who came to town, and a high percentage of the tourists who came to town, would see Lower Broadway.
That's right.
So we could see everybody from winos stumbling through the door occasionally to British rock stars, or Eric Clapton or the Rolling Stones, you name it.
Right.
And it might have been cheap sleaze for a while, so far as it was, buildings were neglected and property values were low, but it was the place that if you wanted to be seen by every single player who came to town, the one magic block was Broadway, between 4th and 5th. You were going to be seen by the ones who mattered for guitar buying.
That's right.
Now, the way it is now, the real estate values are many multiples more than they were, but they have open windows on the bars and they have rooftop bars. They blast the sound out. The quality of the music in places like that only begins to sound good after not less than 6 beers or 4 mixed drinks or a combination thereof.
In your opinion.
I built my career on it. Give everybody 6 beers before they came.
I view it as having become one of the layers of hell, layers of hell in Dante's Inferno. And no, I don't want to go back. People asked me shortly after I moved here, do you miss Broadway? And I said that it was a relief when I could look in the rearview mirror driving away from it for the last time that I was going to have to go back to work in that place.
I get it.
That it was.
Well, this building you're in now is banging, man.
Yeah.
This building is awesome.
If I was to do the song title, it would be "I miss who you used to be, but I'll not miss who you are today. Goodbye."
What about, do you miss those bluegrass convention weekends? That's every employee always complains about
Well,
that.
except for George. George likes those.
No.
He likes those events.
Some of those events were okay.
Okay, where everyone's banging on banjos and mandolins.
Yeah, they were never.
There were some parts
and
of that that were
D28.
irritating.
Yeah.
They're not huge. They're not big. Big for the store for sales, but it is good to have folks coming through.
Well, this is like the meetup, the
That's
meeting
right.
place.
That's right.
And of course, everybody who comes in here is going to want to meet George and talk to George. And George is always so gracious. He loves having people.
No, that's true.
Because they're like-minded. Everybody
We want
likes
to have
that
people
stuff.
coming who truly appreciate and understand the music and the instruments. But the way Broadway is today, the musicians don't like to hang out there unless they're being paid to play. It's not a fun place for me to be.
It's different. It's different. I think like a lot of folks get asked this question about Nashville. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. I know how you feel about this. I actually love Nashville and what it's become, and I'm in the minority in that in some ways, because people be like, "Really, you like all this?" I really do. I never hung out on Broadway myself, but for folks that want to do that thing, it's great.
Nashville's awesome.
It's wonderful as far as the skyline and buildings and everything going up, and 100 some odd people moving here every single day. I love it. I think it's great. If you own a house, I think you're in a good place.
Oh, man.
I'm just really fortunate that I got in on a house when I did 20 some odd years ago or 15 some odd years ago. The way I see Nashville growing, it grew into a full-fledged city. And the music, granted, it's not only, well, it was never really just downtown Broadway. I mean, it was much bigger.
Well, it's expanded to the east.
It's expanded everywhere.
Five Points area.
And there's a lot more in
There's a lot
different
of stuff
genres
out
of music, and there's a lot of music that's being made here in town, and that I love. That I love. So yeah, it's not your thing, going down to Broadway.
Well, the fact is a great amount of truly wonderful stuff going on in Nashville now.
Yeah,
Totally.
But so far as the music and what I see going on in the bars on Broadway, that's not where I generally would recommend for most folks if they want to hear authentic, good quality music, with the exception maybe of Roberts. Roberts Western is still good. And Third and Lindsley is good, but they're going to have to move because that building is being sold. And the Station Inn still has great music, and it's pretty amazing that they're still there because it's this little cinder block building in the midst of high rises where the owner of the property they like bluegrass, so they're letting them stay. But that property is worth tens of millions of dollars, and the rent on that building is low. But there's more good stuff going on in Nashville now than ever before. But there's a lot that goes on Broadway that would cause me to not be wanting to be there with my shop, and we couldn't sell guitars there.
Yeah.
The people who are hanging out on Broadway, for the most part, are not going to buy a guitar, and they don't want to pay $30 for an hour of parking to come in and look at guitars. But the main reaction they would probably have is, how come those guitars are so expensive? And if that's what they think, those are not likely to be the people that I'm wanting to hang out with. But we have more good, interesting people coming through the door now, greater diversity than almost ever before.
It's a great location.
The city has grown exponentially, and there's been a lot of growing pains. But when I criticize what Lower Broadway has become, it's because I think that it would actually be more viable and better if they keep the bleeping windows shut, so that they could have bluegrass in one place and Western swing in another and old time honky tonk music in another, and if they want to play country rock, whatever, you know.
It only sounds like hell from the outside. Once you go inside, you can't, you know.
Once you go inside, it's loud enough. If you stay there very long, you're going to go deaf.
What do you say?
Beyond.
Let me ask you this question. I'm sure it's been decades. When was the last time you went to a bar on Broadway, sat down, and had a beer?
You're right. It's been decades.
And I bet you it was Roberts, wasn't it? The last time.
Yes. And the fact is, when was the last time I've stepped into one or walked
that's a
right
better
up
question,
to it so I could hear it? That's been a very short time.
Oh, okay.
I periodically do go there and check it out.
Do you really?
And it nauseates me. I don't want to be there.
It's still a great land of opportunity, though, this town.
Oh,
It's
The
getting too
town
crowded.
is great.
But if you're a musician, you can get something cooking here, and it doesn't take long.
well, it depends on how talented.
Well, yeah.
I've noticed that.
Well,
with,
and
like,
also
people
what
with
network,
sales.
you know,
Yeah.
you know how everything
There's
here
more
is just
musically
all a
going on
network.
here than Los Angeles
Yeah.
or even New York.
Right.
You know, and Los Angeles is so spread out.
Different, yeah.
It's you could get in your car and spend 4 hours going from point A to point B, and there's actually more networking opportunities. This town has great opportunities. My criticism is on a very small
No, I
area.
got you. No, I get that.
But the town is great, and the opportunities for musicians and for songwriters are fabulous.
Let me pose a question here. And you've made commentary in numerous videos about the health of the vintage market moving forward. Your
Good
thoughts.
question.
We chat all the time.
Good question.
We get into guitars countless times.
Yeah.
We're always on prices, whatever it might
Yeah.
be. Well, you have the nicest collection at this table right now, hands down.
Hands
It's an
down.
incredible collection
And many tables.
at many tables.
Yeah.
So here's what given that you keep 90% of all the instruments you ever buy. You know. But here's my question. You've held your collection for decades. You use them, you have them. What's your headspace on the market and the future of vintage guitars and your collection?
I would never claim to know, because I would have never guessed 50 years ago
It would have turned
that
into
a
this.
$2,500 pre-war Martin would be 200 grand at some point, you know. And for me, it got to the point at times where I would think, if I don't buy a Lore, I may never be able to get one, because they keep going and going and going, and you think, I got to get in, you know, and just you would never know. I don't think you would ever know, and I would defer over here. You know, it has a much bigger hand on the pulse of what it's doing. But in my collection, I've never bought anything that I didn't love the way it played and love the way it sounded. There
You
was
didn't
never.
buy it to buy it.
I don't. I'm not interested in accumulating as much stuff as I can.
Same with you, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
No point.
I just don't like having instruments around I don't play. What's been the hot sellers lately? What's been moving? You know.
You know, it does vary.
Right.
Because certainly old pre-CBS Telecasters are moving quite well. Stratocasters, if they're really quite pristine, are moving well. If they're worn but not modified, other than just play wear, they also sell well, but not for as much as sort of museum grade.
Right.
It's a sort of strange thing, you know, if you buy a brand new Fender from the custom shop, the ones they call the new old stock, just like an old one except unplayed, brand new, not a scratch on them, they cost less than the Closet Classic, which has a little bit of artificial aging and lacquer checking, and that costs less than the Relic model. It looks pretty beat, and that costs less when you get to the real super custom stuff. They beat the crap out of them. It looks like some slob owned it, but they charge more for that. Now, I personally don't want my guitar to look like it was owned by a slob who just abused it, but to have some honest wear that looks like a skilled player used it for a while. Actually, there's a certain charm to that. And it also means you can buy it brand new and you don't worry about getting the first scratch on it, so you can use it, because these things were actually made to be used. If you get something that is mirror smooth, shiny, you feel bad about playing it at first. It's like having a new car and you hate to get a scratch on it and whatever, but you can buy a brand new one that's just looks really sort of neat wear, like some good player used it for a while, and that's okay. But the fact is, the quality of a lot of the new instruments right now is better than it was 50 years ago. And people act so, and when I say that, they say, oh, that's amazing. Well, 50 years ago was 1973.
Right.
That's not a golden era period. That's some of the worst guitars ever made by Martin, Fender, and Gibson. They're making better guitars now, but the term vintage even is becoming something I'm almost uncomfortable with, because they say, how old does something have to be vintage? Well, the answer is that the golden era hasn't changed.
No.
For Fender, it's pre-CBS, so it's like 1950 through very early 1965. Now, for Gibson Electrics, it's basically from right after the war ended, World War II. You say the war, and there's been so many of them, but I'm still old enough, I say the war, and right now the world's in the midst of war.
Till early 65.
But the point is, the golden era for Fender hasn't changed.
No, but that also
They're just
answers
older.
Tom's initial question too. Which instruments are the best selling? And I think you're answering
The true
it right
golden
there.
era stuff.
The true golden era stuff never wavered. You know, if you look at the price of, say, a 1937 Herringbone D28, you can have that go straight up on a chart moving up. What doesn't move straight up on a chart might be something that gets lumped in together when sales are hot, like a post-war D28, right? People don't set out for 1947 D28, you know, but at the same time, when a 37 is 200 grand or 150 or better $1,000 or whatever it might be, well, that brings up the prices around the instruments.
That's right.
Around it as
Everything-
well. Post-war comes up in that way. Now, do I consider that to be the golden era? Well, I don't think post-war and slightly after
No, but it's
post-war,
proportionate to
1946, 47 D28 isn't the golden
proportionate.
era anymore.
It's proportionate to what is in the golden era. If that
Correct.
stuff's going to move up, the other stuff's not going to be left behind.
Not going to be left behind, correct. But in terms of no-brainer sales and what we have, what we can always rely on,
Well, we've got three of them
exactly
right here.
forward shifted Martins, pre-38 on the 3-body styles fast sellers.
Well, then 39. So I have a question for you. I've always wanted to ask this. I always keep forgetting to. What was the deal in 1938 when Martin changed their bracing just for that 1 year? Didn't they go back to it in 1939?
No,
they didn't
no.
go back.
No, they went from
forward shifted bracing stops in late 38, and they haven't done any like that until quite recently now that they're doing replicas.
So when did they ever go back to?
No,
they didn't.
No. It went to rear shift at the late 38, right
they
around
did
38.
go back, but it's very recently.
Yeah, recently.
The
I'm
brand
talking about
new
No, I was talking about
now.
back then.
No,
and
they
there are
did
different
not
models,
go
but
back.
What was the
reason
purpose
for
of
it,
the?
I mean, I have my theory on why, but I just want to know if you know the answer, the real answer.
Well, they also at the same similar time, but after the first quarter of 39, they went to narrower string spacing at the bridge and at the nut. So they went to the 1/11/16 rather than 1 3/4. And there was just a lot of people who wanted a guitar that was going to be used for not necessarily jazz, but still for more modern music, supposedly, where the older ones had a wider board and it was mainly for finger picking, and when flat picking and a lot of complex chords, semi-jazzy chords came in, a lot of these players wanted narrower necks and slimmer profile to the neck, and that's about the same time that they came up with the rear shifted bracing, which they thought might be a little more strong structurally.
Right.
People were starting to use heavier strings, and the country musicians would use heavy strings, and some of them, instead of using a capo, if they wanted to play in the key of A with G fingering, then instead of putting a capo at the second fret, they just put heavy gauge strings and tuned it up to full step high, and Martin was trying to cut back on warranty work. So,
Which makes sense, yeah.
Was that where you were going?
Oh
with
yeah,
this?
always.
All the bridges were pulling.
Yeah, oh yeah, I believe it, and it contorts the top that 3/4 of an inch. That little, such a small measurement, but when you move the meat, the bones of what holds the top in place.
So structurally.
Yeah, it's a structural thing, and then by you moving it a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch going back, it really made the top so much stronger. The entire construction is,
but it didn't make them sound better.
No.
When did the bridge plate get thicker?
That was in the 40s, wasn't it, George?
Yeah,
Was that-
but especially when you get into the 60s and you start seeing.
Yeah, but
sure
I
enough.
mean, even in the 50s, there were.
Yeah, but
always-
when was the
But you
change?
see,
Was it
the
early
golden
40s?
era for some of
Later.
these instruments is quite a few years ago, but the fact is that the golden era hasn't changed. So when I opened up my shop, January 1960, 70, excuse me, not 60, January 1970, a 10-year-old guitar was January 1960. That could still be a brand new Sunburst Les Paul. It could be a Dot 335 Gibson. And the Martins, even that were 1 year old, were Brazilian rosewood. And the ones in 1970 came with Indian rosewood and a molded plastic case. But in 69, they had the old Geibe cases that were wood with leatherette covering and plush lining. And if you go back even 5 years previous, 1965 was only 5 years ago when I opened up my store. A D28 from a 5-year-old one. It was not only Brazilian rosewood, it had the long bridge saddle instead of the drop-in saddle, and it didn't have a black pick guard, it had the tortoise shell guard, it had ivory bindings, and it had genuine ivory nut and saddle. So today you can buy used guitars that can be as much as 50 years old, and they're not as good as a new one.
Right.
But for most of my career,
Right.
I told people that used would be a better deal than buying new.
It's no longer
I
the
don't
case, right?
tell people that anymore.
I know.
I say golden era instruments
Yeah, you're
are
right.
still the best, but that the new ones now
Yeah.
are remarkably good and in many cases
Better.
better
Yeah.
than instruments 50 or even 60 years ago.
Agreed. And as you're laying out the years from when your shop opened, and if we go back even further than that, you take a 1935 made Martin, whatever it might be, and you go up to 1945. Well, it actually deteriorated a little bit from its original design. That's the purest form, 35, 36, 37.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so 10 years later, it's already somewhat a cheapened form of what we had 10 years prior. You go back into 1955, 56, 20 years later, well, it's a whole different beast, and we're going on the same trajectory here of quality somewhat going down. When you went into the 60s, the only thing you really had going for you is the fact that they had Brazilian. That's about it.
Right.
And then by the time you got into the 70s, most instruments were built using white glue for tops, back, and sides. Then you went into the
Bridge in the wrong place.
Bridge in the wrong place. Then you went into D35s with three-piece backs, and you kept going into the 1980s. Weren't great years for Martin with regards to
Until
quality.
'86 when they started putting the truss rods in.
Right. But then
it's
what-
a bit different.
It's a little different. What I'm trying to get at is when you went into the 90s, that scale tipped to where today, and in the last 10 years, the instruments that Martin is building is better than anything they built from 1950 to 1980.
Yeah.
You know, 30, 40, 35, 40 years.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that block of time, and that couldn't have been said. Everything that was vintage going into the 80s, everything was better. Everything was better vintage.
Question.
It's not no longer the case.
Question for George. Would you agree that 1965 was the end of the golden era for Gibson and Fender?
Yes.
Okay, why is it that year?
For
Why?
the same reason for both of them.
Okay.
Change of management. Ted McCarty left Gibson. It was still owned by CMI, Chicago Musical Instrument Company, but McCarty left, and after that they put in bean counters
That's
who
right.
didn't know how to play a guitar and knew nothing about guitars, but they were number crunchers, and they wanted to cheapen things and increase profit.
That was
And
one of the things.
It also happened at about the same time that the Beatles came, and all of a sudden the demand for new electric guitars went up. But they changed management, and Leo Fender sold Fender to CBS in January of '65, and CBS didn't take very long to screw it up. The guitars made in the first half of '65, a lot of that was still made pre-CBS style and even pre-CBS parts. But by the latter half of '65, the guitars were different as night and day.
Oh.
And so the Fender guitars changed radically, and at the same time, but to a lot, the demand for electric guitars was up because all of a sudden there was this big rock and roll boom. But the other thing is, though, that the management at both companies, just by pure coincidence, changed at the same time.
But interestingly enough, if you follow, it almost seems like in the late 60s, every single big business here in the United States got the same memo, where it was just that. Bigger companies purchased up smaller ones, more bean counters, more management, more people, quality goes down. Same thing, you can make the same claim with American cars.
And motorcycles.
And motorcycles. I mean, if you purchased a Harley Davidson motorcycle, an Ironhead or something like that from 1975, there's none of them on the road today for a reason. You know, but there are 1975 Yamaha little cruisers out there coming along, or Hondas or whatever it might be. So there's some sort of business model that took over in the 1970s in this country, where if you really took the Fender Gibson thing, Norlin Gibson, CBS Fender, AMF Harley Davidson, the bowling ball company purchased them up in the 70s or early 80s.
That's right.
A lot of these companies went through that, and they became a shell of what they were, riding on their history, while you had corporate dudes kind of, you know, pulling the levers on what's what.
Right.
You know,
Which is why we have 11-pound 1979 Strats.
that's it, buddy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, the anniversary model.
The anniversary model.
Find me one that's under 10 pounds.
11 pounds. Here you
Although
go.
there also was a general theory back then that heavy was good.
That's right.
And they put the brass hardware,
Sure.
brass bridges.
I still hear it today.
Heavy, heavy.
And well, look at
And
the
they said
Strat.
The heavier the,
The
body
Strat
is,
had
the
all
better
brass.
it would be. There were even a few makers who were producing, these are private, small companies, stone guitar bodies where you had to have a stand that you could play it because you wouldn't want to wear a strap.
That's
Damn, bro.
ridiculous.
That's a terrible
It was
idea.
supposed to be giving you more sustain.
Right.
Now people talk about how light a good,
That's right.
desirable, solid
That's
body
right.
guitar should be, and they want to play it acoustically. But there was the idea that even like Danny Armstrong made plexiglass guitar bodies, and the idea was that on an electric guitar the body imparts no tone. It's just there to be a platform to mount pickups
To mount
and
pickups
bridges.
on, yeah.
And you wanted a body that had no resonance, no acoustic properties whatever. Now, we don't see very many people endorsing that now, but for a while, yeah, but
Yeah, but who knew?
Yeah.
You had nothing to compare it to.
Right, right.
well, I also remember a lot of the rockers.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Before, when I was in college, the few people who did play rock, it seemed like it was just bar E chords up and down. It was.
I like the guys that
It
come
wasn't.
in looking for an axe. And anytime somebody comes looking in for an axe,
Are
you
you
give
gonna
them the
bring this-
12-pound custom. Here you go, buddy. Here's your axe. Oh shit! It's got all the tone in. Yeah, it does, bro. It's got all the tone.
Yeah,
right there.
everything over 9 pounds is just tone, my friend.
Tone monster.
But the point is, for Gibson, their golden era for electrics is from post-World War II through mid-65.
That's right.
Yeah.
An early 1965 ES335
Right.
has the old body shape.
Good guitar.
It has the right internal
Yeah.
block. It has good pickups. It has a 1 and 11/16 nut. It has a good neck contour. It has a stop tailpiece.
Oh,
It
yeah.
has nickel-plated hardware. By the end of the same year, it's that toothpick thin,
That's right.
narrow neck, lousy neck contour, and it has a tailpiece. It has chrome parts. It's not the same guitar. It's a radical change for both Fender and Gibson in the same year.
What went to hell faster, Gibson or Fender?
Fender went down pretty bad, but Gibson went down even worse.
I think so.
I mean, you look at an early '65 Firebird Gibson. It's got the neck through body. The pickups are actually routed individually, and the different models actually had different ornamentation. But by the end of '65, all the Firebirds had the exact same
Swimming
neck, the
pool
exact
route.
same
Yeah.
body, there's dots on the board.
Right.
And the only difference was they had this, the route that you could put one pickup, two pickup, three pickups,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
and the electronic were mounted onto the pick guard,
Right.
not into the body the way the earlier one was.
The handy slider switch.
And different switch
Yeah.
system, and they were horrible guitars. That's an example where the specs changed so much that you couldn't even recognize it as the same model.
Yeah.
That's one of the most radical examples. But
And then by '69, they brought in the polyurethane at Fender, and that really kicked it over the edge.
well, in '70, Gibson's stuff, when Norland sold, when Norland came in, at the beginning of 1970, then things totally went to hell. And the acoustic Gibsons were horrific, and the electrics were not as good as the ones in the '60s. But actually, the interesting thing is, starting in '70, though, on the electrics, they did give up doing those ridiculously skinny necks.
Right.
So that the early '70s solid body Gibsons, in some of the models, actually were more comfortable to play than some of the late '60s.
That's right. And the Les Paul itself never did get narrowed. Did you ever notice
It
that?
did not.
Why is that?
Well, because there was no Les
Well, there
Paul
was
for a
no
long period.
standard. There was Les Pauls.
68 came out with
It
1 and
out in
11
'68.
16.
They were still doing narrow necks on some of the
That was the
other stuff.
reintroduced.
Right.
But
Yeah.
then also in '69 with the deluxe.
Yeah, but those
You
have
know,
one
the
of those
profiles of the necks got thinner.
He's talking about the space.
I know, he's talking about
But
the,
so
the
that's-
nut width.
so
The nut
no
width
Les Paul-
never
Yeah,
changed.
no Les Paul ever went to
Well,
a
the
narrow nut.
'68 Les Paul was built pretty well. In the '69, when they started pancake bodies, and the quality went down pretty quick.
But the point being is that in the period of time where all those skinny nut widths were around, there was no Les Paul.
Right.
That's why the Les Paul never suffered.
Well,
severely.
68, there was a lot of skinny neck guitars.
Sure. Oh,
that's true.
Came back out.
Yeah, there's-
And you had the
there is
customs.
that overlap.
You had the customs.
The Les Paul did go to the older neck dimension,
Right.
and that's probably one thing that Les Paul did never really truly design the Les Paul guitar, but he endorsed it. But he did insist on the neck, so the neck feel stayed.
And then by '69, they started doing that ridiculous recording and the personal.
Les liked
Hard to
those.
find.
Yeah.
That
Or
was
lift.
his idea.
How did Les Paul feel about the SG?
He didn't much like them.
Is that right? I don't know. I'm sure there's a story there that I don't know about. But next thing
I heard a story that I heard him tell the story at the Iridium when asked the same question. He said he hated that body shape.
Is
He
that
was like,
right?
take my name off of that.
Is that right?
And they did.
And that's how it went.
And they did. I don't think that there was any threat or anything like that. I think they probably said, hey, what do you think of this? And from what I heard, he said, I don't like it.
Wow.
All right, question for the group. Everyone has to answer. I feel bad that we've got Vince Gill here and we haven't hardly let him talk. What's something you always wanted to ask me? All right, now I'm going around the table. I'm going around the table. I want to get into this because this has been a pretty hot topic on the channel. Don't think too long. Don't just off the top of your head. Ugliest electric guitar ever made.
All right. We've done this before.
Let's do it again.
I've had more time to think about it. The Corvair.
The Gretsch Corvair?
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
That's pretty.
Good choice. Go ahead.
I go with the Bo Diddley.
Oh,
I go with the Bo
You
Diddley.
hate the
The reason
rectangular
being
shape,
is it's the least creative
right. Just
out of
big
any
old-
design that I've ever seen in my entire
big
life.
old block.
Yeah, that's just my thing. It's just not very appealing. Maybe because George always said, "What's your line about the Nautilus shell? That things in nature, all the most beautiful things, and through the perception of a human being, all could be found in nature, like the Nautilus shell, the curves,
Right.
whatever it might be.
Right.
The Bo Diddley being a rectangle
Right.
doesn't fit into
Right.
that.
I get
So
you.
yeah, that's mine. Yeah.
I get you. What do you think?
Good question. I take a lot of shit for this. Any of those flying V-like guitars,
Oh sure.
you know, they just look silly to me.
Yeah.
Even the 58.
No, the great ones were the great ones, but they
Yeah.
started.
Even the reverse flying.
You ever seen the ones that are backwards?
What about that's the one, bro.
I have to.
That's the one. Whatever that is, that's the one. I take my diddly back.
I have to choose electric guitars carefully because if I get too small of an electric guitar, I'll look too fat.
Oh,
Do you realize how fat I'll look if I play one of
you're
these?
so fun.
I'm still gonna go with my Gibson L6S.
Oh, that's
I knew that was yours.
Oh Lord. What about you? What do you got?
Remember that abomination that Henry Jeskowitz came up with something up here?
It's got to be the Firebird X.
Yeah, the Firebird X.
I knew
The
it.
switch system and the body shape.
Abomination.
And it also had the
Robo.
robo tuners, and it was, they lost their ass on that one. But it was impractical. It was incredibly ugly.
Oh man.
And then they ran them all over with a backhoe, right?
Did they? They destroyed
Yeah,
it?
yeah. On video.
On video.
They had all of them laid out in a field, and they went over it with a big
They were incredibly ugly.
backhoe
Really?
or one of those.
It
I've
was
never
something
seen
building
that Henry
machines. It's
Jeskowitz
online.
had a personal hand in designing it, and they promoted it as being the best thing they'd ever made.
Oh,
And they put a lot of money into promotion of it, and it was ungodly awful.
Didn't the same thing happen? Mass destroying when Fender tried to introduce those solid state amps in the late '60s. With all the zodiac sign names, Scorpio, and Taurus.
You got me. I don't remember.
Man,
I've read somewhere that they were such poor sellers that they had to destroy warehouses full of them. Just nobody wanted them.
So they just like burned warehouses down.
Yeah, like I wonder if there's any truth to that. I always heard that. I would love if anybody out there
I've never
knows.
heard
These things
anything
suck.
about that.
You never did? Okay,
I
maybe
think
it's
at least they
bullshit.
could have done something like donate them to schools or something.
they couldn't get them in tune. A bunch of poor kids
Yeah,
over
the
there.
kids
trying
sound
to
a
get
crappy plan.
Well, the amps played in tune.
All
there
right,
you
let's
go.
go. Let's
I was
let's
going with
spin
the
this
fire
positive.
index.
Let's spin this positive. I'd love to know your personal. What's the most beautiful guitar ever made? Electric.
It's easy.
What?
Stratocaster.
Like what year? What color?
1954 when they first came out.
Burst.
Two-tone sunburst.
Like-
Just think about it this way. You're a kid, you've never seen anything like the double cutaway with the contours, 3 pickups. Maybe you've seen a Telecaster before. You get this thing in your hands and you start looking at it and you're like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I would love to go back for one day and just see what that would have looked like for the first time.
Oh, dude. The contour body is magic.
I'm
Beautiful.
old enough to remember that.
Yes.
But
Pretty
I,
interesting.
I was not interested in electric guitars
Right,
at the
right,
time, but I
yeah.
think that the 335 and the Strat
Right.
are both absolutely classic shapes,
Right.
more so than the Tele. The Tele is very utilitarian, and I don't think its lines flow quite as well as either a Strat or a 335. You know, the Les Paul looks real good.
The right ear Les Paul, and I don't want to, like, that's mine, and I don't want to go to just to say the golden, the 59 burst. Well, why are you saying that? Well, there's only one reason. Like, you go throughout Les Pauls and their tops change, the recurve changes, bubble tops to Les. The 58, 59, 60 Les Pauls have just such a beautiful recurve to them. Even their wood selection, even if it's not super grainy, flamey, it's still beautiful. It's something about it. The lines, the thickness of the binding to the nibs, to the rolls, everything is so delicate. Mine is the golden period Les Paul. I think is the most beautiful. The 335 is great. The Stratocaster, I would say the Stratocaster is probably the most important electric guitar ever made.
Yeah.
And the
I have to
reason,
agree.
and because prior to that, you didn't see a neck screwed into a body and have it taken seriously.
Well,
Telecaster.
Tele.
Between a tele.
Telecaster.
Fender, what Fender did, and I get
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Strat because of the lines of the body made it a little more special than the Telecaster.
Definitely.
But that construction method, in my mind, completely deviates from the old world luthery skills of a dovetailed mortise and tenon, even the Les Pauls with the tenon lengths, set necks, much different manufacturing process. You could make probably 2, 3, 4 Strat Teles in the time that it takes you to create one carved top beautiful
And
Les
the
Paul
tremolo.
that way. And the tremolo, the Stratocaster is such a beautiful instrument. I wrote an article on this where I actually think that the tremolo, the synchronized tremolo was invented first. And then it just
They
went
needed a
into-
vehicle for the
that's it.
trem.
That's it. If you take the synchronized tremolo out of a Stratocaster, you cease to have a useful functional
Well, that-
instrument. There's nothing you could put back in it.
Part of it
If
makes
it's
the
not the two
hardtail.
fulcrum system.
You know, that's. I mean, how many people like the hardtail
That's it.
Stratocaster?
The tremolo,
Even if you don't
unit
use the
itself,
trem, you want the
You're
trem.
right. It has a sound to it. The greatest, biggest gift out there.
Well, you know, it depends how you define important.
All right, hold on a
Because
minute.
if
Vince's turn to
you-
No,
answer.
it's all good.
Didn't have the broadcaster, there wouldn't have been a Tele
Can't answer
following.
that. No, I can't
And if
answer
you
that.
didn't have the Tele, there never would have been a Strat,
Oh, I get it.
because the Telecaster got Fender along with the bass and the amps. That's what launched Fender. And without that, the Strat didn't come till 54.
Mhm.
But Fender started in 46 with amplifiers, and people talk all about Leo's greatest contribution ever being solid body guitars that were practical. But he also made amps that would kick ass. And if you don't have amps that will do that, the solid body guitar wouldn't have taken off.
True.
And
Good
Leo was at the forefront of
Yeah.
being the first one to make electric instrument amps that would really kick butt.
Yes.
What was there before? You had those little Lyon and Healy designed
Right.
Gibson amps,
Right.
and the little Rickenbacker amps that were about the size of a bread box.
Yeah.
They were okay to amplify a guitar so that you could play it in a band along with acoustic instruments.
I
Like
get you.
Bob Wills could have a steel guitar and but Leo Fender introduced amps where one guitar
Yeah.
could be louder than a 30-piece
Sure.
stringed orchestra.
No, it makes sense. All
It
this-
didn't happen before that, and the demand for solid body guitars goes along with that. And it also changed the whole scene of music, because suppose you own a club. You could have a choice of hiring this big
Sure.
band that has 30 pieces with a conductor and a complete entourage
Or just
and a
one dude with a
bus,
twin.
Yeah.
or no, you don't hire just one dude.
I
You
got
need
you, I get your
four.
point.
Four
But the
dudes.
other guys are probably union members, a big 30-piece entourage, or you can get four schmoes. One got an electric guitar, an electric bass, and you got an electric keyboard, and you got drums. You
No, I
don't
get
need
your
to
point.
amplify the drums; they're loud
No, I
enough.
get your point.
But you could take a four-piece group
Right.
and play music that the younger generation like to dance to. And if your club is making more money selling booze than the tickets at the door, and you're the club owner, and you can hire four non-union guys or a 30-piece union orchestra,
We really
and
went left
either
here,
one of
George.
them could fill the place.
We really
Which
took
one
a
do you
hard
get?
left here. All right, Vince, I love you, George. Vince, tell us about your
About the union? Let me tell
Yeah,
you.
let me hear about the union.
You know what the last thing Jesus said to the union was?
What?
Don't do anything till I get back. I said that to Carnegie Hall. I mean, the union guys were on break in New York City, and I walked in and I go, hey, you know what the last thing Jesus said to the union was, don't you? They go, what? I said, don't do anything till I get back. And they all
Amazing, yeah.
cracked up, and then they,
Oh,
all,
that's so good.
they all hang me the bird and go,
Yeah,
fuck
yeah.
yours, but that's funny.
That's funny.
No, I would go with a 335.
That's the most beautiful.
For the versatility of it, and it's the first guitar I got when I was 10.
Right.
In turn, I think the question was posed as was it your favorite or visually the most beautiful?
Most
Yeah,
beautiful.
and I think that I like the way they look. The double,
yeah.
you know,
They
it's
are
like a
beautiful.
woman.
I get it, man.
You know,
The lines on the early 335s are gorgeous,
Yeah,
and
they
the
are.
lines on some of the late 60s ones are less so.
I mean, I made my career out of playing the Telecaster. You'd think I'd say Telecaster,
Right.
but
No, I get it.
Tellies still have amazing sound.
Oh, yeah.
and great
It's a
versatility.
different sound from a Stratocaster, and
Oh, yeah.
when it comes down to it, my favorite sound on a Fender is an old Telly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have that lead pickup on an old Telly is just amazing.
It's very
And
distinct.
it has a frequency response. If you just take an oscilloscope, plug it in, hit a few notes, it has almost the same type spikes as you see on an acoustic guitar. It's almost like an acoustic amplified. And if you take a Gibson humbucking pickup, it's a completely different signature. It doesn't have, the tonality is very different. But the tonality on an old Telly, particularly that lead pickup, it's absolutely fabulous. The other thing is, if you take an old Telly and you string it up the way they shipped them originally, with flat wound heavy strings with a wound third, you can play stuff that's way different. And if you want to sound like Luther Perkins, you're not going to do that with 9-gauge first string. He used flat wound heavy strings.
Yeah.
And if you want to find how to finger pick on guitar and play amplified acoustic style music, you can do damn well on a good P90 Les Paul strung with heavy strings, or on even a Telecaster. You can put round wounds and try it, or flat wounds, but you can finger pick on it. You can do all kinds of stuff that people would think of. They keep trying to come up with how can we ever play acoustic music at amphitheater volume. You could try some heavy strings on a guitar that has frequency response that is actually similar to what an acoustic guitar is like.
Shoot,
And
the
it
top
does work.
jazz player these days plays the telly.
Yeah, man.
Julian Lewis.
Sure.
There you go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in the hands.
It's all in the hands, man.
What about you?
You're gonna be surprised by my answer because it's a guitar I never would play. Like I don't even know how to play it, but just the way they look. A '59 blonde ES5 Switchmaster.
Oh,
Oh,
shit.
man.
Come on, dude.
That's a beautiful
I
instrument.
thought you were gonna go with Rickenbacker. I don't know why.
Well, I love those basses.
Yeah.
Blonde
Dude, a
Switchmaster.
blonde
That's,
Switchmaster.
that's
I mean,
beautiful,
I mean,
man.
come on.
You're right. That's it's big.
That's
a big
You
guitar.
got one of those, don't you? Yeah, Switchmaster.
And ES5 now.
ES5. You got it here?
We have two ES5s, not the
Yeah,
Switchmasters.
But those with the
the
heavy
P90s.
flame and the blonde, the backs on those.
It's a good look.
Man. That's
No, you're right, that's
The
beautiful.
ES5 still looks as pretty as a Switchmaster. It's just it doesn't have the same switch system.
Yeah, it's such a cool. You like those ES5 Switchmaster? Hell yeah.
Well, I wouldn't personally play one.
Yeah, me neither. But they are cool. Cool looking.
They look cool, but no, I wouldn't use it.
Another guitar I would throw in there. There's another one I probably wouldn't play. Is you're gonna hate this. You're gonna hate this. I just think they're rad looking. 61 SG custom.
Oh yeah.
It's white with 3 pickups. They just
White.
look amazing.
Oh,
They look
yeah.
amazing.
Didn't they call them? Wasn't the official catalog color cream?
Is that right?
It may have been, but yeah, they do look
I
neat.
think.
I don't
Yeah.
find them a very practical
No,
guitar.
their
Their body is a bit too thin. They have good tone, and on an SG, if you have a rhythm pickup, that
can get a lot
neck
of shit for
tenon
that.
is cut
You
in
said.
so much that the neck has no stability. You know, the single pickup SG Junior, you're not likely to break the neck off at the body. But the other thing is the way they route the control cavity. It's very close to the edge, and if
They
you
break the crack.
step on the cord, you know, yank that cord, you yank the whole end of the body off
Yeah.
there. So the necks are long enough that they're a little rubbery, and they made them thin, shallow. You know, 335, like a 59 335, the neck is thick enough, it's not so wiggly. But the SG, the neck is too thin for stability. And then if it has a rhythm pickup, it's too weak at the neck joint. And then at the other end, you yank the cord, you break the body. And so you can break the peg head, you can break the heel, you can break the body, and it's a little too thin. But
Other than that,
it's good.
Is that what Rosetta Tharpe played?
Yes, sir.
Was it 3 white
That's right. Damn right.
Yep.
And
And the thing is,
guy
you
from
could
Alice
actually
Cooper.
redesign the SG to be a much better
Glenn
guitar.
Buxton.
and those are cool too. The 3 pickup ones because they balance out the heavy, neck heavy.
Except that middle
The
pickup
3
gets in the way.
pickups. Yeah, but the weight is what you want on there.
You think that's the main? You think that's the
Yeah,
main
they made
thing
the
that
body
you'll
a bit
hear people
bigger.
say about that middle pickup is it's in the way.
Not to mention the bullshit wiring. Where you
It's the wiring I thought you were
A lot
gonna
of what I
say.
criticized about the SG, you could redesign the thing, it would still look good, it would actually feel better and play better. But they've kept with that original, what I consider defective design.
You're
Didn't
gonna
they
get
get
a lot of shit from that. A lot of
didn't
SG
they,
fans out there.
Oh, a lot
It
of
could
SG
be
fans.
Yeah.
well,
So
I'm saying you can make one that still looks like an SG.
right, didn't they
But
try
you can
that?
keep the best at.
Didn't Gibson try that later? I think we have an SG down there that every time I look at it, I think it's a Gill because it's a little bit thicker.
No, I'm talking about quite a bit thicker, but you have to get the contours right. And the ones Gibson did in the early 70s, some of those contours on the cutaways were. And
So
the
they got
neck
to be
joint
more
were
substantial,
awful.
but they lost the curves. And
Yeah, they didn't do the curves right at all. They had no aesthetic sense.
got it.
And they had these weird curves. There's just some stuff that doesn't look natural.
Can you go into that a little bit? Because I made mention of what I said, and you told me this years ago that everything that you see as a human being that you perceive to be beautiful could be found in the natural world as well. And outside of the Parthenon,
Well,
you're not going to find something with such great symmetry
but
being pleasing to the eye.
the curves of nature are incredibly good. And the spiral, it's a mathematical formula for it. It's the Fibonacci spiral. It predates life. Spiral galaxy.
Oh, George.
It
Have you ever played a Fibonacci?
You never played one of those, Tommy?
54 Fibonacci. They're incredible.
So good to
Wait a minute, I changed my most beautiful guitar.
You can look
My
at
most
the
favorite
picture
guitar is the
from above,
Fibonacci.
Done.
and it has that same spiral.
Right.
It's the same formula. Snail shell, fern frond, ammonite, nautilus, hurricane, flushing toilet.
Toilet? I was going to say toilet.
That's the spiral. And when some of those things, if you deviate very much from them, but you'll see other forms in nature, and most animals and plants have amazingly good aesthetics.
That's right. I think that's
it's
why,
also
yeah.
structurally good, and a lot of designers, even for airplanes, they're studying some of those flying insects and birds and bats.
Oh, I
and
get it.
Getting
Guys, Guitar
this is
Channel.
stuff that
I know you touched on this a while back, and to add to your point, I think there's a draw.
He's like
of
Cleveland
why
is
a
out there.
lot of guys are drawn to guitars, and that's because it has a woman's shape to it. This is obviously a waist, and whatever it might be, but that's what it is, without even realizing
some
it.
of them may have more masculine shapes, but even
Those are the
still,
ones I don't
those
like too much, like the Bo Diddleys. Which ones have a masculine shape?
Men don't look like rectangles.
Well, they're more rectangular than a...
How long was I out?
Pear shaped.
How long was I out? How long was I out?
Guys, I gotta pee really bad. So let's
And
let's
as far
get
as
to let's get to the
body
to the
forms.
punchline.
Michael
What's the
Angelo
punchline?
What do
did pretty damn well.
Let's-
on
what do you wanna say?
statues of men.
good.
As
You good?
well. So the forms of nature are good, and I do like to have guitars where the neck conforms pretty well to the anatomy of the human hand, and there are some of these things that just don't.
Right.
And I can't help but think that the people who designed some of that stuff were not good players or not players at all, because you'd think that you just pick it up and feel it, and you pick up the guitar and does it fit, does it conform to your body? Now I recognize somebody who's a basketball player who's 7 feet tall has hands that maybe are not the same size as mine, but the same general body or neck shapes still seem to appeal. Well, the one thing that really gets me, and I'm still perpetually surprised, I encounter some people who have enormous hands and they're very tall, and they still like a small neck.
Yeah.
And I don't get it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing.
What are your
how
thoughts on
much
that, Tom?
I got big hands, and I like those little
Yeah.
61 necks.
I think
Well,
it's
I,
really one.
I like
there was a
those
reason why I
61
picked
necks.
on you, because I know that you like
I
those
it
more
I like
tapered.
I like a wide but shallow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You like a smallish. Now you got giant hands.
I prefer a proctologist with
Yes.
small hands.
We gotta end this. All right, we gotta end this.
Every time.
Anybody want to say
Hey
anything?
Vince, you know what I moonlight as?
I don't know.
Thank you guys for watching the show. Sorry we get off a little in the weeds at times, but it's a deep thoughts type program.
That's right.
Very deep thoughts. Anybody want to add anything?
I think we should say thank you to Vince
Well, absolutely.
and to George
That goes without
and to
saying.
these cats.
That's right. It goes without saying.
Thanks for
I
putting
should've
up
said
with
it.
all of this, Vince.
Yeah,
No,
thanks.
I watch them all. I'm crazy about you. You know that.
love you, buddy. All right,
Big fun.
friends. Thanks for watching. See you next time at Homeskoolin Goes to Gruhns. Peace out.